So let's jump right into it. Last week, those of you who are brand new or forgot about Cafe Oleh, first off, thank you for joining. We had a record number of participants last week, and we have 1,300 plus registrants for the rest of the semester. We're really excited for you all to be here. Last week, we delved right into media literacy, how to keep up with the news by using context clues, the words you already know, and we delved in by reading a summation of what's happening with the war. That was hard for a lot of people. It should be, not just because the topic is hard, but also because we are teaching you everyday modern Hebrew here at Cafe Oleh. So we want it to be a bit challenging. It's reflective of what's needed. Unfortunately, maybe reflective of the Hebrew you have learned or are learning, that they aren't keeping up with everyday Hebrew like the news. And today's going to be no exception to that. We're going to get into something that you do all the time, whether you actually do this at home in your countries of origin or not. But here in Israel, living here makes a big difference when you are not only buying your own food, but also picking what you choose to eat. And we're going to start not only by learning how to read nutritional labels. We're going to do it with a great example. And in the context of last week's class, this is not only a classic Israeli food, I think one of the most classic Israeli foods, more than the ones you may be thinking of like falafel and sabich. This is also a story of resilience in very difficult times. So this is a great story. And our product that we're going to be looking at, nutritional label, is this guy. And if you can see it, but if you can't, you'll get a picture of it. This is a bag of what we call in Hebrew ptitim. Some of you may know it as Israeli couscous or pearl couscous, but in Israel, we call it ptitim. And it's a great story that basically goes like this. 1948, Israel is fighting a war for its existence, independence. It goes on for a year and a half. And in the meantime, Israel also is absorbing close to 1 million Jews as immigrants, as Olim, some of whom survived the Shoah, the Holocaust, some of whom have been forced from their homes from North Africa and the Middle East and the Balkans because of the formation of the State of Israel. Then the Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, turns to the head of one of Israel's then largest food companies, and still is, Osem, and says to the guy, help us feed all of these people. They're living in transit camps called ma'abarot. They have little access to food, money, equipment, appliances, everything. We need to feed them fast. And so what they created was ptitim. Ptitim, the original form, and they come in multiple forms, and most people know the couscous one, and that's how it's known, Israeli couscous, that comes in a ball. This one that I just held up, I don't know if you can see it, it's a little blurred on the screen, is rice shaped, and it even says Oleh on it. It's not rice, and it's not even pasta. What it is a combination of wheat flour and water that's extruded through a mold, and then it's toasted in an oven. So the idea is it's not like pasta, right? It's not just flour, water, or flour and egg mixed together and then dried out. This is water and flour that's then made into a shape, toasted, so it has a long shelf life. It gives it extra flavor, and it's very, very cheap to make, and it's very nourishing. And to this day, it's considered a nourishing side meal. Some people try to make it a gourmet thing, but this is like, if next week when we talk more about food, and I'll tell you a little bit about next week's class in a bit, this is comfort food at its best. And it was made out of a dire necessity to simply eat and survive. It comes in multiple shapes nowadays and other additions and things like that, but this is a classic staple in many Israeli kitchens. Whether or not it's yours or not doesn't mean you're any less Israeli, but it's a great product to know, and it's a great product to also give us a sense of what goes into our food. So what I did was I took a snapshot of the nutritional label on the back, and we're going to translate this together. Okay? Like I said, everyday Hebrew. I'm not going to teach you what an ulpan does, and I'm not going to teach you the way ulpan does, which is often not reflective of your everyday life. Learning how to read the back of a label of any product is essential for your own health, for whatever you may do in life. Okay, and so in this case, we're going to go through a very simple nutritional label, and I'm going to focus here with what time we have on the actual nutritional value, not the ingredients. Okay, food products, we're going to have a multitude of ingredients. You can look at that on your own and look up a lot of those words on your own. This one's the easiest because it only has one ingredient. So it lets us focus on the nutritional value of it. So first, let's start at the top. Ptitim afuim ores. So our very first word here on the right, let me just move my preview window, my camera window, there we go. Very first word on the right is afui. Okay, afui comes from the same verb as le'efot, to bake. So something that is baked is afui. Okay, so ptitim afuim. Ptitim is what we call this dish. Ptitim is also the term that we use for snowflakes, right? Any kind of flake we often call we call flakes. We call ptitim, right? And that's the idea that it's a small shape that's made in multiple amounts, and you eat multiple, flakes rather than one little piece. And this is the original version, ores. It's shaped like rice. It looks like you may be familiar with orzo or the pastas that look like this. This is not pasta. And the round shape is not couscous in the traditional way that couscous is made, as I explained before. Okay, but it's baked, and that's the point. And then the word under it, this brown line right under the title, l'chivim. L'chivim is ingredients. Okay, so already you can start familiarizing yourself with where to look for foods and what's in them. Okay. And as like we saw last week, I'm also including the shoresh, the root, the three letters that each of these words have. So for example, for ingredients, the word is connected to the verb lehalkiv, which is to construct. So we can understand that l'chivim are the construction materials for something, right? That's how the words are connected. So let's look into the l'chivim before we get on to our next word. As you see here, it's kemach chita. Okay, kemach chita. Kemach, I didn't include these because, again, it's not focusing on the ingredients, but you should know these words. Kemach chita. Kemach is flour. Chita is wheat. Okay. Second, what it says here in the parentheses and then in the next box. Mechil. Mechil is going to be a very important word for all of you in general, but especially those of you who have food allergies. Okay, when you need to know if something has the potential to be an allergen for you, mechil. Mechil comes from the verb lehachil. Mechil and lehachil means to contain. Mechil is simply the conjugation in the present tense. It's also it can be also understood as a participle, but in this case, it is a verb and it means contains. Okay, and the next word, sound it out to yourself if you don't, this word doesn't look familiar. Big clue, it is not Hebrew. We do use it in Israel. But considering I just said what kemach chita is, wheat flour, and then in parentheses next to it, it says contains this word, you should figure out from the context, this word is gluten. Okay, gluten, gluten. However you want to say G-L-U-E-T-N. In English is gluten spelled like this in Hebrew. Okay, so it's informing you that there is that, and immediately under it, it says, Meda al rechivim. Rechivim is that word again. Allergenim. Okay, Meda, coming from the same root as leda'at, to know. So Meda, information, al, about, rechivim allergenim. Allergic ingredients or allergenic ingredients. Okay, and you see that exclamation point. A lot of nutritional labels will use that, or it'll simply say mechil in a parentheses like you see at the top. But all of those are ways to inform you that this ingredient may contain some allergenic products. Okay. what does this include? So first off, we already know, it's really letting you know, for those of you who need to know about gluten, it says mechil gluten chita. Okay, it includes gluten chita, not just any kind of gluten, but gluten chita, wheat gluten. And second, alul lehachil soya. Okay, that gets us to our next word. This is one of the most important words you're going to hear all the time in modern Hebrew in a given day. Alul. Alul means liable, likely, possibly, in a negative sense. So if you're going to say, for example, today, right? It rained in most parts of the country today. Alul laredet geshem, or haya alul laredet geshem, because it already has rained. It was likely to have rained today. Haya alul. Okay, this also conjugates alul, alula, alulim, alulot. We use this to indicate something is liable or likely or possibly with a negative connotation. The opposite, meaning liable, likely, or positive with a positive connotation, is not the word here, which is amur. Okay, but alul. When you see alul, and you will see it in allergic things like this, it means liable in the sense of beware, right? It's telling you be aware of possibly allergenic ingredients in your food. Alul achil soya. Soya, you can figure out what that means. Well, this is likely to contain soy, meaning when they say alul la'achil, just like they do in English, it's likely to contain soy. It means it was processed in a factory that contains soy. Another reason why ptitim, and especially this brand, Osem, is a story of resilience is that one of Osem's main plants in Israel is in the town of Sderot. We talked about Sderot last week. Sderot is the biggest town nearest the Gaza Strip. It has faced a barrage of rockets for upwards of 20 years. It has an incredible story behind it. It's an integral part of not just Israeli society, but Israeli culture. We've had previous classes about its cultural contributions, but its financial contributions are no less. Having the Osem factory there, and the Osem factory, thank God, has already restarted in the midst of this war. So again, a really important story of resilience is not just the specific food, but also the company that pioneered it, Osem. Okay, now that we've gone through ingredients and allergies, let's get through this nutritional label. Okay, this is, again, all food products in Israel aren't going to look exactly this font type or this size, but they are going to include all of the things that you see on here, sometimes a little bit more. Not always in this specific order, but it's usually in the order we're going to go through, just like you do, for example, in other countries where you have the nutritional value on the back and it's by category and so forth, right? Same thing here. You're going to, the vast majority of food labels in Israel in Hebrew will contain the same information, more or less in the same order. Excuse me. So let's first start by knowing that we're looking at the nutritional label because it says here, simun tezunati. You see that right here? This thicker bar right here. And I've translated it on the right-hand side. Simun tezunati. Simun comes from the same root as the word lisamen, the verb lisamen, which is to note or to mark or to check, as in check, not to check the contents of something. Siman is a sign, and simun is the marking, the act of marking. What? Tezunati. Tezunati comes from the noun over here, tezuna. Tezuna is nutrition. It comes from the same root, zayin vav nun, as a word many of you probably know, mazon. You've probably heard the word mazon in the sense of the word food, and you're right. Mazon means food in the sense of nurturing, something of sustenance, right? And that's how it's connected to the word nutrition, just like in English. Nurture, nutrition, same thing here. So tizuna is nutrition. So simun tizunati, right? We turn tizuna into an adjective. It's a nutritional marking or nutritional signage on the back of the product. Okay, and that's what you're going to look for to see what its composition is. Any food product, not just ptitim that we're looking at now. So you have here, we're going to go on the right-hand side and go down this list. Okay, the first one is one I didn't include in the translation because when we sound this out and we look at the words, we can probably figure out it's not Hebrew in origin. The first word is energia, and in parentheses, kaloriot. So immediately you should figure out what we're talking about. Energia, energy, or aka calories. In many countries around the world, outside of the United States and some other English-speaking countries, they call calories energy because that's what calories are. Okay, so when you see energia, it's not talking about anything other than calories on a food product, only on a food product, right? And then it tells you how many calories are in it, based on the three different categories that they have here. One is for 100 grams before preparation, the middle one is 100 grams of prepared, and the other one is for a regular serving size, which we're going to get to in a second. Okay, under it, it says, under energia, this first line here, it says, Sach hashumanim, parentheses, gimel. What does that all mean? Sach means total. Shumanim. Shumanim is the plural. Shuman is the singular. Shuman comes from the same root as the adjective shamen. Right? Shamen, fat. Shuman, fat as a noun. Right? Shamen is an adjective. Someone is fat. But shuman is a fat, or in this case, shumanim, fats as a noun. So sach hashumanim, the total fat in this product, and then the parentheses gimel, right? Gimel, we're going to talk about in a little bit, but a preview of it, if you didn't figure it out already, stands for grams. Remember, this is Israel. We use metric. If you're not used to metric, Nefesh B'Nefesh has a great converter on its website, and you can go on, just simply go on Google and type in metric conversion, and there are great tables out there. I don't necessarily know them by heart either after all these years. Don't worry if you don't, but it will be in metric in Israel. Okay, so sach hashumanim, gram, measured in grams. And then it says under it, which corresponds basically to row 14 here, mitocham, of which or from which the total amount of fats. And now, just like you have in other countries, and it's even further emphasized the fact that it's indented here, right? It's indented so it goes and understands, you understand that it's a subcategory of sach hashumanim because it's indented, just like it would be in any other language. Mitocham, from which those fats, chumtzot shuman ravuyot, excuse me. Chumtzot shuman ravuyot. So chumtza. Chumtza is a word we're going to talk about a lot in just about 3 months from now. We're going to come back to this word. It's one of my favorite words, and you'll quickly understand when you can figure out its root. It's shoresh. It's chet mem tzadi. You probably know some words that have, a lot of words, in fact, have this root. We're going to talk about it a lot as we get closer to my favorite holiday, Pesach. But chumtza, in the meantime, means acid. Okay, so acids, because it's chumtzot, shuman, fat, ravuyot. Ravuyot, as you see here in row 17, means ravui, means saturated. Okay, inundated is another way to think of this word in other contexts, but saturated is ravui. So chumtzot, shuman, ravuyot, saturated fatty acids. That's basically how you translate this first line. And then the one right under it, chumtzot shuman trans. So if we said that chumtzot are acids and shuman is fat and trans sounds like what it is, trans fatty acids. Okay, so we had saturated fatty acid, now we have trans fatty acid. And then under it, again, a long word. Number one, it's a long word, so we automatically know from context it's probably not Hebrew. And second, because we're under the topic of shumanim fats, what is it likely to be? Cholesterol. Cholesterol, measured in mem gimel. So if gimel was grams, What do you think mem gimel is? Milligram or milligrams. Simple as that. Okay, let's move on to our next word here. In bold, we've gotten through the fat category. Now we're in natran. Natran is sodium. Okay, we're going to get to one of my favorite topics in just a second, and it's previewed by the word natran. Natran is not Hebrew in origin, it's actually Latin. There's a couple of those words when it comes to sodium, and when it comes to this category of words, which is elements. I always emphasize this point when we're talking about learning Hebrew because we often approach Hebrew, or we come to understand Hebrew through a religious context. We don't always think about through an everyday context. And even if we look at it through an everyday context, we're often using a cognitive bias of our religious upbringing or religious identity. Here's a space where our religious identity isn't going to help us, and yet the words still exist. Natran is not a great example of that because it's not Hebrew in origin, it's Latin. But the next one is, and the next one is one of my absolute favorite words, pachmemot. Not just because I'm a big fan of pachmemot, but I'm a big fan of this word, pachmemot. We've already done fats. We just did natran. What is a word that is always on the back of a nutritional label marking it? Well, let's try to figure out this word. First off, mitochan, just like we had before, mitocham, from which. We break down what this category is, and this next word is sukarim. Sukar, sugar. Sukarim, sugars. What category of food molecules or parts of food is sugar? Pachmemot. Pachmemot is carbohydrates. How do I know it's carbohydrates? Even if I don't know this word, because pachmemot is a combination of two words in Hebrew. I'm going to write them here with the incorrect nikud generated for whatever reason, but we're going to take care of that in a second. Okay. That's correct. And that's not correct. Okay. Pachmemot is created from two words, pachman and meiman. Pachman, first off, what is carbohydrates? Think of the word, and even if you don't remember high school chemistry here, think about what is created with the word carbohydrates. Carbohydrates, carbon, hydrogen. There's other stuff obviously in carbohydrates, but those are the two major things. Pachman is the Hebrew word for carbon, right? If you didn't know that, you probably know words, for example, like pecham or pachmemot. Pachmemot, we just talked about pchamim. Pecham is coal, as in charcoal, right? Charcoal, we often, when we get towards the summer and we talk a lot about camping and grilling, pachman is going to be really important because we're looking for pechamim, charcoals to light our grill. That's actually the origin of the name of Israel's largest Muslim city, el-Fahim. Fahim is simply pecham in Arabic, and it got its name because that was an epicenter of charcoal making back in the day using wood. Okay, pachman is the word in Hebrew, the scientific word in Hebrew for the element carbon. Meiman should give you a clue of what it is, not just because it's carbohydrate, but it includes one of its most important uses in the universe. Meiman is related to the word mayim. What is mayim made out of? H2O. Meiman is hydrogen. Okay. So again, as much as we approach Hebrew with important context, i.e. religion, culture, society, it also has science. And here's a great example. There are other words that are unique to Hebrew for elements. We're not going through them today, but just know these are two that are important in general to know, and they give us a very important word, carbohydrates or carbs. Pachman, meiman. Okay, let's move on. So we've done the total carbohydrates and which ones are sugar, how much sugar is in this. Now we get to sivim tizunatim, another important health-wise thing. So we already said tizuna means nutrition, right? And that tizunati is nutritional, okay? So what do you think sivim tizunatim are? If I already tell you what sivim are. Sivim are fibers. Sivim tizunatim, nutritional fiber, right? The fiber that we're looking for that's healthy for us, excuse me, in our food, sivim tizunatim. That's where you're looking for the amount of fiber in a food. Sivim, by the way, are fibers in any sense. Fibers in clothes, optical fibers that you use for telecommunications, simply sivim, fibers. But sivim tizunatim, nutritional fibers. Okay, and then finally, we have another scientific word, a great scientific word, no less important than natran when we are looking at the nutritional value of food, is chelbon. Now, if you didn't know what this word was, natran is, again, not a great example. Pachmemot, we deconstructed to figure out what it's comprised of. Chelbon. What do you think the shoresh, the three letters that make up chelbon, is? If you see here that it's a nutritional value. Think about this very carefully. If you guessed, let me write it over here, if it'll let me. If you guessed chet, lamed, bet, you'd be right. Chelbon is connected to the word chalav, milk. What is milk a source of? Protein. Chelbon is protein. Okay, if you didn't know this word now, you now know chelbon, protein. So chelbonim, proteins, right? It may be coming from different places, whatever, but now you know there are 11 grams of protein per 100 grams of uncooked ptitim, right? Lifnei hachana. Okay. Finally, it tells you what these three categories are, and I explained them before, but we're just going to read this last little bit, and then unfortunately, we are running out of time in our very short class today. So first off, lelo. You see here, it says, there are two asterisks up here, lefi horaot hachana, in parentheses, lelo tosefet melach utavleinim. Lefi means according to, horaot hachana, preparations, right, for making it. You can call that instructions, but preparation instructions. Lelo tosefet melach utavlinim. Lelo means without or none, as an adjective at the as a prefix, excuse me, at the beginning of a word. But lelo means without. Okay, tosefet, addition. Melach, you should know that word. Salt. Ve tavlinim. Tavlinim are spices or seasoning. If something is mitubal, it is seasoned or spiced, okay, with a taf. And then also it says mana, kos ptitim mevushalim 80 gram ptitim yevashim. Mana. Mana is the word that they used a lot at the top. Mana means a serving. It can also mean a dose, but it means, in this case, a serving size, right? And it's telling you what is a serving size. Kos ptitim, a cup of ptitim mevushalim. Mevushal, our next word, means cooked. And specifically from 80 gram ptitim yeveshim. 80 gram, 80 grams of ptitim, not just any kind of ptitim, but yevashim. Yavesh is dry. Okay, so it's telling you that one serving, according to their model for OSEM to produce this and the nutritional value here, meaning what you see here on the left-hand side, a manat ptitim muchanim, a serving of prepared ptitim is 80 grams of dried ptitim that's then been cooked. Okay, this is a relatively simple nutritional label in the sense that it only has one ingredient. Again, this class was focused on reading a nutritional label. Now you know all the major categories to read the nutritional label of anything there is, right? Because we know all the things you're looking for. Energia, kaloriot. Shumanim, fats. All the different types of fats there may be. Trans fatty acids, saturated fat, cholesterol, and so forth. Natran, sodium. Pachmemot, carbohydrates. Sukarim, sugars. Again, all the basic things that make up food, you now know how to say them in Hebrew, and you now know what to look at because many of the labels will look exactly like this. In the description that we're going to share on YouTube and in the email, I'm going to share with you a great resource online, which is also which gives you the nutritional value of all prepared foods and all processed foods in Israel. You can simply go on the website and it'll give you a table very quickly to see everything that's there. Unfortunately, we have to break as we're at the top of the hour. So first off, thank you all for joining. Those of you who are able to, who saw the email, again, apologies for the technical difficulties Nefesh B'Nefesh had. It's no less frustrating for all of us, but we're happy that you were able to join us at the very least. There will be a recording of this next week. God willing, we'll be back absolutely normal time, starting at 8 o'clock sharp local time. Looking forward to seeing the numbers we had last week come back. Next week, we are going to be continuing talking about a very essential part of Israeli life and Israeli identity in Hebrew, just like we did last week with media literacy and today with food. We're going to continue with food next week, but we're going to talk about how to be a good consumer in Israel. We're going to talk by looking at supermarket ads, both online and print, but also we're going to use some, as we say in Hebrew, havanat hanishma, oral comprehension, right? So we're going to look at some ads that are available online, and we're going to listen to them and help translate them together. I'm also going to share what's very important nowadays, especially with the ongoing war and the already announced price hikes in food. We're going to talk about how to be a savvy and consumer-friendly shopper, meaning how can we save some money at the supermarket, what we should look for, what's the difference between supermarket brands and supermarket chains to know which ones we can get good deals at, and how to read ads and everything that goes with it. So in the meantime, Toda rabah, thank you all who were able to see the email and joined us, albeit last minute. You will get a recording of this email in the next day. We want to be sure that everyone knows we are up fully to normal. This was a one-time fluke. We will see you next week at our normal time of 8 p.m. local here in Israel, talking about food. Toda rabah, thank you all so much, and see you all very soon. Take care.